Why does consciousness exist? Sights, sounds, smells, textures, the warmth of love, the sting of sadness. Why and how do we experience any of it? We've mapped the entire observable universe, measured every single neuron in our brains. We've even trained machines to think and speak like us. And yet we still don't understand the most basic thing about our own existence. Why is there a little person behind those eyes? And a story of your life that exists through time? I've always been haunted by this question, and I know you've definitely thought about it too. But this is no longer just a philosopher's puzzle. Understanding consciousness is more urgent than ever before. With AI evolving faster than anyone could have ever imagined, we are right on the edge of creating artificial consciousness, something that could change the world or even end it. And still, even the experts don't agree on what human consciousness even is.
I think we have to acknowledge, as consciousness researchers and philosophers, that there's one thing about consciousness that almost everybody agrees on. And that is that it is essentially the felt quality of experience.
Well, I would agree that most researchers say that, yes. Here's the problem. Every single thing that you say about yourself derives from information in the brain. Otherwise, you can't say it, and you can't think it. Which means when you say, I have a felt experience, it's ultimately because something in the brain has constructed the information that says, I am a me, I am a thing, and the thing has a property, and the property is felt experience.
Is there an answer to the question of consciousness? To find out, I spoke to the world's leading philosophers and neuroscientists, and even ran some experiments of my own. So that if one day a machine says, I'm alive, we'd know how to tell if it's really telling the truth. Even if, as I discovered, that may not matter at all. I think, therefore I am. Before looking at what the modern scientific research is saying, I wanted to first look at everything we already know about consciousness. And there's no better place to start than the French philosopher René Descartes. 400 years ago, Descartes famously said, I think, therefore I am. It was his attempt to find something that was certain in a world of illusions, deception, and uncertainty. He concluded that the very act of doubting proved the existence of a thinking self. There had to be a mind doing the doubting, a consciousness behind the question. At first, it feels like a solid foundation. Consciousness, in its most basic form, is usually described as the experience of being aware, whether it's of your surroundings, your thoughts, or your sensations. It's what makes you feel like you. But the deeper I looked into this question, the more fragile that definition started to feel. Because even though Descartes gave us a powerful philosophical anchor, no one seems to agree on what consciousness actually is. And that makes everything more complicated. The first two words of Descartes' quote, I think, are where we immediately see the first challenge. What is a thought? Is it just a reaction, a sensation, an electrical impulse? Or is there something deeper? Because if thinking is what proves we exist, then we need to understand what thinking actually is. And more importantly, whether all thinking is conscious or if some of it is just the things happening without us experiencing it. The more I looked, the more I realized how much of our experience happens without us ever knowing. We pull our hand away from a hot stove before we even register the pain. Our bodies recoil from danger before our minds catch up. We can't hold our breath until we die because once we pass out, a deeper system takes over, one that doesn't require our permission or even consciousness to function. Our hearts beat, our pupils dilate, we even form sentences sometimes without knowing what word will come next. So if thoughts and actions can happen without awareness, then maybe consciousness isn't just about thinking. After all, many people like to believe that we're the only conscious animals, but we know for a fact that we're not the only thinking animal. We've seen elephants paint pictures with brushes they've been taught to hold, and the things they paint sometimes mimic the shapes they've seen in the real world. Crows have learned to drop stones into bottles of water to raise the water level, just enough to take a sip. That's solving a problem by imagining the outcome first. Octopuses unscrew jars to get to food. Parrots plan trades with researchers. Some animals can even recognize themselves in mirrors, understanding when they're being watched or mourn their dead. These aren't just instincts. They're deliberate and flexible behaviors that are often uniquely tailored to each new situation. So if thinking alone is enough to suggest consciousness, where do we draw the line? At what point do we stop saying it's just a trick of nature and start wondering if there's something it feels like to be that crow, that elephant, or that octopus? And if animals can think, remember, feel, and act with intention, what makes our consciousness so different? Well, this is why some people pose the concept of degrees of consciousness. The idea that consciousness isn't binary, on or off, but a spectrum. That maybe a crow isn't as conscious as a human, but still has some form of inner experience. That the depth or complexity of consciousness can vary depending on the organism or even the state it's in. You see this in models like Barrett's 7 levels of consciousness, which range from basic survival awareness to things like service, inner wisdom, and unity with the universe. Others try to map it neurologically, with brain activity levels during sleep, wakefulness, dreams, meditation, anesthesia, even near-death states. Consciousness isn't always clear-cut. It can shift, expand, diminish, break, return. And then there's the more informal stuff. Color-coded charts on Etsy, Reddit threads that map different states of mind like they're stages in a video game. Spiritual frameworks talking about awakening or ascending through higher levels of consciousness. Science talks about it in terms of neural integration or patterns of attention. But whether you're talking spirituality or neuroscience, they're all trying to answer the same thing. What kind of awareness is happening and how much of it is there? Because once you admit there are different levels or kinds of consciousness, you're no longer just asking, what is it? You're asking, where does it begin? And that's where things get even messier. You're staring at your laptop at 8 p.m. Your work was supposed to end at 5, but there you are. Laptop open, work half finished. And then it hits you. You're overworked, underpaid, and no matter how much you do, it never feels like enough. As if it wasn't bad enough, you now have to worry about all the layoffs and AI taking your job. Living expenses only keep getting worse, and it feels like there's nothing you can do about it. You've been watching tutorial after tutorial, but everyone is just trying to sell you their new magic course with different methods and strategies, all promising results with no actual guarantee that any of it will actually work. You don't have to feel like this anymore. You can take control of your life and switch to a career that will give you the life of your dreams. And if you feel like you need help, you can take a closer look at Triple 10, the sponsor of today's episode. Triple 10 is an online education platform that helps people transition careers into tech without any prior experience or expensive degree required. The programs are flexible, beginner-friendly, and designed to give you the best chance at landing a tech job. And it works. Around 82% of graduates get hired within 6 months with a median salary of $70,000. And if you don't land a job within 10 months of finishing your program, you get 100% of your money back. It's honestly a no-brainer. They also offer unlimited externships with real companies, so you can keep building hands-on experience even after graduation. In a world full of empty promises from charlatans and fake gurus, Triple 10 teaches you the business skills that actually last, the ones that are in demand now and will remain relevant into the next decade, even with AI. If you're feeling stuck, maybe it's time to choose something better. Learn a new job in tech starting from just $200. Click the link in my description or scan the QR code for a free career consultation. If I decide to raise my hand, I can do it. I think the thought and my hand goes up. But what's actually happening? Well, a neuron fires, muscles contract. But how did a thought trigger that chain reaction? How did something immaterial create a physical effect in the world? Well, this is the mind-body problem. How does consciousness, which is for all intents and purposes non-physical, emerge from the physical brain? Is the mind just the brain? Or is there something more, something beyond the physical?
Both philosophers and scientists have wrestled with for centuries, and it seems like everyone kind of comes up with their own different theories. One of the most famous ones we've heard is from Descartes himself, which is dualism. Basically, Descartes believed that the mind and body are two completely separate things, where the body is physical, it takes up space, it follows the laws of nature. But for him, the mind was non-physical, so it doesn't take up space, it can't be measured, and he even thought that the mind could be immortal.
It closely mirrors a lot of religious beliefs, which is like the body is just a temporary shell, while the mind or the soul, as it's more commonly referred to, lives on forever.
But then here's where things get a little bit complicated. Okay, so if the mind is truly separate from the body, then how exactly does it control the body? How do the thoughts, which have no physical form, how do they move arms, speak words, or even feel pain? And this is where Descartes kind of got it wrong, because he never really answered that question. He suggested that the mind interacts with the body through a pineal gland, which is like a small structure deep in the brain, but he could never prove it. It's been around 400 years since Descartes, and no one has been able to prove it yet, even though many people still believe in this theory. In fact, all the research that we have from modern neuroscience is kind of pointing us in the opposite direction, which is that the mind and body are not really two separate entities, but are rather like two sides of the exact same coin.
I think one of the things that has emerged gradually and is still emerging in neuroscience, this realization that those aren't separate things, that the brain, which is part of the physical body, processes information. It computes stuff. And it builds simulations of the world and simulations of itself. And the thing that we call mind is information that lives on that platform of neurons and synapses. And so it's not really a substance. It's not really a separate thing. It's information that's constantly changing and constantly being processed in the brain. And from that point of view, there's no problem anymore, and there's no mind versus body any more than you would look at a computer and say there's a division between the physical computer and the things that it's doing.
To better understand what the modern scientific literature is saying, we spoke to one of the world's leading researchers in the field of consciousness.
I'm Michael Graziano. I'm a professor of neuroscience and psychology at Princeton University. And I've studied a lot of topics over the years, but for about the past 12 years, I've been studying this topic of consciousness, of the brain basis of consciousness, and also now of the possible artificial computational construction of consciousness.
According to Graziano, the mind isn't some mystical force pulling the strings behind our actions. It's similar to software, basically the code that runs on the brain's hardware. And he explains this using a theory that was developed in his lab called the attention schema theory, a framework that describes consciousness not as a magical essence, but as a computational model.
Most theories of consciousness have some kind of magicalist element in them. Like at some point people are saying, well, you put this here and you add that and then poof, kind of a magic feeling emerges. And so when you talk to people who are trying to understand this stuff technically and build this stuff technically, they don't know what to do with that. Like you can't build the magic and you can't study it and you can't measure it. And so AST, or attention schema theory, has come along basically saying, here's a way that you can think about it as an engineer. The schema is a bundle of information that represents something. It's like a schematic diagram in a way of something. And the brain builds schemas. Sometimes people call them models, simplified chunks of information. Like the brain has a schema that represents the body. There's a schema that represents visual objects in the world. The brain also builds schemas of itself, of its own internal processes. And there's one internal process that's particularly important for this theory, and that's attention. And attention means the brain is focusing resources and deeply processing something. Whatever the brain's focusing on at the moment, it doesn't just focus on it, it also builds a sort of schematic picture to itself. So it can essentially say, I am focusing on that right now. And that's the attention schema. It's not just attention, it's a schematic model of attention. In this theory, that thing is what convinces us that we have a conscious experience.
That was the first time I ever heard someone explain consciousness using science so clearly. But if that's still a little confusing, here's a concept that should help. Think of your brain like the Wi-Fi on your phone. Behind that tiny icon is an entire system. Signals bouncing between routers, data flying back and forth, complex protocols running non-stop. But you don't see any of that. All you see is a simple symbol that tells you whether you're connected or not. According to Graziano, your brain is doing something similar. When you focus your attention on something, whether it's a sound, a thought, or a memory, your brain doesn't just start firing those signals. It turns on its own Wi-Fi icon that says, I'm doing this right now. That icon is basically what the attention schema is, a mental model your brain creates to track its own focus. Just like your phone hides the complexity of the internet behind one little icon, your brain hides the complexity of attention behind a single, powerful feeling, awareness. And that, according to Graziano, is what we think of as consciousness. When you think of it this way, it all starts to make sense. But none of this answers the question why. Why is it important for the brain to create these schemas? When you think of the phone analogy, it's important to create that user interface because there's a user, an external observer. But in the case of the mind, since there is no external observer, what is the evolutionary need to still create this attention schema?
So a brain building a schema of itself, your self model, is important for the brain to control itself. This is terribly important. So of course evolution comes up with these solutions. You have to build models of things to control them, to know about them. And so subjectivity, the very notion that we say, I have subjectivity, I am a thing, I am a being, I have a mind in there. This is all self-description, it's all self-model. It's the brain building a model of itself. It's not detailed. The brain doesn't know about its own neurons and connections. It's this very fuzzy kind of concept of self, but it's really important because it helps the brain keep track of what it's doing and make predictions about what it might do next.
But if the brain needs a model to control itself, wouldn't that then mean that animals also have consciousness in the same way that we do?
That's a super good question, and of course lots of people debate it. The answers depend on which particular theory of consciousness you subscribe to, but if you approach it as I have, so we're looking through the lens of neuroscience and through the lens of the brain compute stuff which allows us to make claims about ourselves. From that lens, the kinds of things we're talking about, the kinds of self-models we're talking about, definitely humans, definitely other mammals, probably birds, creatures like reptiles. But there is a point where this must fade out along the evolutionary tree, and so it's probably not very prominent in something like a fish or a frog, even though they're very sophisticated animals.
After talking to Professor Graziano, I was somewhat satisfied with his explanation of consciousness as the brain's attention schema of itself. But one thing still kept knocking at me. If all of this, all of our conscious experience is simply just the brain building models of its attention, then who are we really? Are we just a random collection of neurons firing in a certain way? Or is there actually a self behind all of this? A consistent personal identity that remains through our lives?
Here is a picture of a 3-year-old kid.
Now, that kid believes that his parents are superheroes. He believes that the gifts under the Christmas tree were put there by Santa, and he can't even tie his own shoelaces. If the resemblance didn't already give it away, that kid is me, or at least is supposed to be. Everything I just told you about that kid, I have no memory of. Like, I only know it because my family told me so. There's nothing he believed that I still believed in. And the last time I checked, I can tie my own shoelaces. But yet, there's this persistent feeling that he is me and that I am him. And it's so confusing. And it reminds me of the famous thought experiment known as the ship of Theseus. Imagine the Titanic was hit, but it survived. And because of the damages, some parts of the ship would have to be replaced. Then over the decades, as regular wear and tear took its toll on the ship, the remaining parts had to be replaced one by one. After about 100 years, none of the original materials remain. Can we still call that ship the Titanic? And even to take it a step further, imagine all of those original parts that were removed from the first ship were used to make another ship. Which of those two ships is the original Titanic? It's a very interesting thing to think about, and it doesn't only apply to ships, it applies to us as well, because our memories are fading, they are being rewritten all the time, and sometimes they're just completely lost to time. You're not who you were 5 years ago, but yet there's this feeling, it's like a gut deep intuition that you're still you, that there's a continuous line that connects that person from 5 years ago to who you are now. And so it's like if our memories, beliefs, thoughts, and even our physical makeup, if it changes over time, then how can we still call ourselves the same person? Like, this for me is like the mystery of personal identity, and is what I really struggle with, like the illusion that we are one continuous being across time. And honestly, I think that word illusion is kind of true because, according to modern science, I think that's all it really is, an illusion.
What I've been saying in this 2003 book, Being No One, is that there are no such things as selves. There is no narrator. There is no little man in the head. There's no agent. But one level of the human self model really has the format of storytelling. And the story that is being told is your life story. Who have I been in the past? Who do I want to be in the future? Of course, you can tell the story much more precisely on a mathematical level as a computational achievement of the human brain. But this narrative, autobiographical level of the human self model, this is what creates this illusion of transtemporal identity, as philosophers say. The sensation that somehow I am the same person in some sense that I was when I was 8 or when I was 25. That's a construct. My name is Thomas Metzinger. I've mostly been working in an area called analytical philosophy of mind and cognitive science, and a little applied ethics too. But I'm one of the persons who founded the ASSC in 1996, and I've mostly focused on the problem of consciousness.
From an evolutionary perspective, what is the point of having this illusion? Because for all we know, you can have actions without a conscious experience. So life, by definition, does not require consciousness, even less the concept of self. And so if that is the case, why do we have it in the first place? What's the evolutionary advantage?
To construct an identity across time, not as a theoretical or philosophical problem, but as a tool for survival, as something that turned out to be good to have in evolution. The sense of identity. How would you develop morals or ethics if you didn't think it was you who could be responsible for something you did? And if you didn't have the ability to think that you could be ashamed of yourself also in the future. And many animals don't have that. This is something that had to be created.
He also mentioned that it's important for us to have this model to be able to categorize and store information better, which definitely gives us an advantage in an ever-changing world.
Conscious information is information about which I can form a concept, I can categorize, I can say, this is a flower I have seen. I can also then voluntarily compare it to long-term memory and say, I myself, with the conscious self model, have seen this type of flower before. That's a kind of knowledge that you then have.
And you can see why this would make sense. If this kid had a deadly nut allergy, and it's life-saving then for my brain to be able to store that information in a mental model of myself. And say, for instance, sure, maybe the cells are different. Maybe I don't remember when I found out, but maybe I'm the one who's allergic. That information belongs to me. Without a stable self-model, that knowledge becomes fragmented and disconnected. It wouldn't matter that the brain is processing the allergy, it matters that the self knows about the allergy. That's the evolutionary edge that consciousness gives us. It's the ability to tie experience to identity. To remember not just the facts, but who those facts happen to, especially when it happens to itself. And that is, in my opinion, the power of the autobiographical self. It doesn't just string together our memories, it turns them into a story about who we are and who we've been and who we think we are going to become.
This all sounds amazing, and I agree with you. But even if we accept that the self is just kind of a useful fiction, a narrative illusion that our brains cooked up to help us survive, there is still a deeper question that I think we haven't answered yet. Why does it feel like anything to be in this illusion? Why does this inner story come with texture, with sensations like the sight of vivid colors, the smell of freshly baked cookies, sounds, memories? Why do our thoughts have taste and weight and warmth to them? Why does remembering a flower from your childhood come with the faint scent of summer? Why does your heart ache when you hear the song of your former lover? Even if we all agree that the brain is telling a story of itself, why is it a felt story?
This one question opened the door to one of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness that we found during our research: qualia. Qualia are the raw, subjective building blocks of experience. The redness of red, the sweetness of sugar, the burn of shame, the tickle of déjà vu. They are what make experience feel like something rather than nothing. And here's where things get even weirder. Because while qualia is deeply personal and subjective, we often assume that others are experiencing the same thing. But are they? This is red, and this is blue. Me, you, and the rest of the world have both agreed to call this red and this blue. But how can we be sure that we see the same thing? How can I know for certain that what I call red isn't what you experience as green? We've mapped the wavelengths, the neurons, and the receptors, but there's no scan, no theory, no equation that can tell us what red actually looks like for you. This is one of the biggest paradoxes at the heart of consciousness, and one of the reasons it's so difficult to study or explain. On the outside, the world appears solid, measurable, and objective. Yet on the inside, the experience of it, every sound, every color, every sensation is private, isolated, and subjective. This is qualia. It's the taste of mint, the sting of regret, the color of the sky just before sunset, and how that makes you feel warm on the inside. It's the song you hear that hits you with the beautiful feeling of nostalgia. It's the way the color red makes you feel. It's not something we can compute or objectively describe. It happens to all of us in a different way. And yet, we rarely question it. We assume that when we both look at the sky, we are seeing the same blue. That's when I say pain, you know what I mean. That when someone laughs or cries or says, "I love you," the feeling behind those words is universal. But what if it's not? We showed 12 different members of our team the exact same sensory illusions, and the results that came back were interesting, to say the least.
All right, so of these two shapes, Which one would you call Kiki, and which one would you call Booba?
Okay. I would describe the shape on the left as Kiki because it is sharp. And the letter K is sharp in my opinion. Kiki fits that better. Booba. Yeah, that gives me more of a soft and squishy vibe.
Kiki would definitely be the yellow triangle looking one for me. And Booba would be the purple blob looking thing, just because I think I associate blob with Booba.
I would name the star Kiki and the purple blob Booba.
I got no answer for that. I know, but I wouldn't. Kiki and Booba. Kika is the one that's an orange star shape type thing.
Yeah, the sharp star shape is Kiki. Booba is a soft star with a soft angled.
Kiki is probably the orange one that's very spiky and triangular. And then Booba, that's, much more rounded, like a capital B, very round. O's, very round.
I'm going to play a sound for you now.
Laurel. 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 Laurel.
Did I hear Yanny?
I hear Laurel.
I heard Laurel.
Laurel. Laurel.
That's...
Laurel.
Okay, it's Yanny. I'm hearing Yanny, but I used to only hear Laurel. That's so weird. Like years ago, I only heard Laurel. That's so weird. I swear I only heard Laurel for years, and now I'm hearing Yanny. That's weird. Is that what it sounds like? Oh my god.
I'm going to show you a photo of a dress that
Okay.
is comprised of two colors. Can you name the colors that you see, please?
I see blue and black.
Black and blue.
Blue and black.
Blue, and is that brown or gray? Is that weird?
There's only black and blue in there.
Right now, I see black and blue.
I can see both blue, black, and white and yellow.
It's white and gold. Well, it looks blue and black, but it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold.
But it looks blue and black to you right now.
But it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold. I know it's white and gold.
Yeah, but when you look at this, what colors are they?
I see blue and black, but I know it's not. I know it's tricking me. I know it's not. I know it's not. It's not blue and black. It's white and gold. It's white and gold. But I see blue and black. It's my eyes. I need an eye test anyway. It's been a while.
We also asked some of them to attempt to describe the color red without comparing it to anything visually.
Red to me is... It's interesting because it's a color of love, technically, but to me, it's always kind of a color of rage or anger. And, when you get so angry that your face turns that color. Red is definitely anger. Like, bullfighting? That's the feeling when you watch somebody fight. Mm-hmm.
Say I would describe the color red by passion.
Even with something so simple like the color red, both Marina and Adeline still had widely different qualia interpretations of the sensation, basically opposite ends of the spectrum. And I want you guys to join in on this too. How would you describe the color red without using any visual cues? Type it out in the comments below. Let's just see how different we all experience the same color. This is the strange, disorienting territory of qualia, the private, first-person texture of experience. And the problem is, we only ever have access to our own. I can't see through your eyes, or feel your sadness, or know what red means to you. Even science struggles here. We can explain the mechanisms, things like which neurons fire when you smell coffee, which areas of the brain light up when you see a face, but we still don't know why that process comes with the feeling of coffee, or the recognition of a friend, or the awe of a sunset. I looked through books, research papers, watched videos, listened to podcasts. I scoured the entire internet, but I could never find that answer. Because, well, there is no definite answer. The only thing I could find was that Everyone else was asking the same question. So much so that David Chalmers came up with a name for it: the hard problem of consciousness. Why does any of this processing come with experience? Why isn't it just computation in the dark? Because the truth is, you could build something that mimics all of your behavior, laughs at the right jokes, flinches at the right moments, even says ouch when it stubs its toe, but still has no one home on the inside, no subjective experience, no qualia. That is the heart of the mystery. Not just what the mind is, but what it feels like to be one. Even language sometimes changes how we see and interpret the world. Take the Himba people of Namibia, a remote tribe with a completely different color vocabulary. In their language, there's no distinct word for blue, but they do have multiple unique terms for what we would refer to as simply different shades of green. So when researchers showed them a circle of green squares with a single blue square mixed in, most of them couldn't spot the difference. But when shown a set of green squares with one that's just ever so slightly a different shade, they could spot it immediately. Their brains weren't broken, their eyes weren't different, but their language, the labels they had for color, literally shaped what they could see out in the world. And this isn't new. If you go back far enough in history, you'll find something equally strange. In Homer's The Odyssey, he consistently describes the sky and the sea as wine dark. No, the Greeks weren't sipping electric blue Cabernet. Some scholars believe the concept of blue simply didn't exist as a distinct experience for them as it does for us. So to them, the sky, sea, and wine were the same color. They weren't colorblind. They could see exactly the same color of sky we see today, but the experience of what we now call blue, the category, the feeling, the familiarity, didn't exist to them. Why? Possibly because they just didn't need it. Their immediate surroundings didn't present them with any blue objects that would have prompted them to categorize it. Red is the color of blood and fire, green the color of leaves, yellow the color of the sun, sand, and ripe fruit. But blue is extremely rare in nature. There's no blue trees, no blue fruit. No, blueberries are purple. And even animals, especially land animals, rarely have blue pigmentation. The sky and the sea are the only major blue things in nature that humans regularly see. But the color of those can be deceptive. The sea isn't actually blue, it only appears that way because of the way it reflects the sky. And even the sky doesn't always look the same shade of blue. It changes with the time of day, weather, and atmospheric conditions, which makes it even harder to pin down to one consistent category. And if something as basic as color, the thing we all assume to be constant and consistent, can shift and blur like this, what else about our experience is just an echo of our biology, our language, and our culture? To figure this out, Emeka spoke with 3 members of our team who are bilingual, who grew up in a different culture and with a unique language and have had to relearn and re-assimilate in another language as adults. We wanted to understand if their experience of the world has changed in any way since learning a new language, and what we found was pretty telling.
Can you tell me a moment where switching languages changed how you felt about something?
There's an interesting thing. My partner does not speak Ukrainian. His first language is French. My first language is Ukrainian. We both speak English to each other, trying to pick up each other languages here and there. And to me, like when we talk about love with him, it feels different than the love that I feel to parents, because to parents, it feels like if I say something like that to them in English, it feels fake. But as soon as I switch, it feels genuine. Now, with my partner, it feels the other way around because we speak English all the time. I love him in English and I love my parents in Ukrainian. That's what I can think about.
When I'm arguing with someone, for French, it's very, it's visceral in a way. I feel it in my body, so I'm very reactive. And I learned through time, and I'm actually using it more and more now, so that English kind of give me that distance, like, acting like a buffer. And I tend to actually express what I'm feeling and what I want to say in a much more, not necessarily composed, like I don't want to sound like I'm arguing better, but almost like it. Or at least I feel like I'm being able to make myself understand better when I argue in English versus French, where it can get too crazy and all over the place.
Do you have like a memory that you feel like you can only access in one language?
So whenever like I talk to my parents and we'll laugh at something really hard, just the three of us just laugh, and my partner doesn't understand what's going on, and when I try to translate it to him, he's just like, that doesn't even make sense what you're saying. So it's not as much as a memory, but just like overall like phrasing too, like the turn, like phrases that you just, humor is difficult to translate, whatever, like is, it feels like such a good joke to you, you just can never explain it to me.
Yeah, I think all of my memories before the age of 6 probably only exist in my mother tongue, which is interesting because that's the only language I knew. So I could explain in English those experiences, but it wouldn't capture the full essence of those experiences because English wasn't a thing in my brain at that time. Does that make sense? Like even when I try to like retell childhood stories in English, it's difficult to encapsulate everything in English because I experienced it in Gujarati. And also I think there's a huge cultural context as well because all those years that I didn't know English, I lived in Gujarat. So culturally, everything was completely different as well. Yeah, even if I try to explain like some of my childhood experiences going to school in Gujarat, where we had a zoo at the school and like bathrooms outside of the school that we had to go use, like these experiences are very cultural and don't exist in the Western world necessarily or at this time anymore. So they really only exist there, but also in my language because that's all I knew how to perceive the world at the time was in that language. This is kind of confusing. Even to this day, it's tricky because I mostly speak my mother tongue with my family only because we don't have any other family or I don't really know any other Gujarati people here. So I only exclusively mostly speak that language with my family. And outside of that, my world is English. So there's like a stark cultural and linguistic difference in experiencing the world. Like I can make inside jokes with my parents that I couldn't translate in English or just wouldn't make sense in English, you know?
From all of this, you can see and tell that languages have a lot to do not just with how we preserve the world, but also how we understand and navigate within it. We can try our best to translate these experiences from one language to another, but there's a world of cultural differences, experiences, qualia, that we're never going to be able to translate. I think Adeline said it best.
It's almost like French is almost trapping me into my emotions and the way I see the world. And as much as there are certain parts of it which I cannot translate into any other languages or express it, but it's just that feeling that it's so instinctive and you know, felt through my body, where English gets me into that space where I can actually listen to myself and trying to pause and understand what's going on and very much give me more freedom. It's like I get out of the trap of emotions and the weight of it and the culture behind French as well and the expectations when I'm talking. And like that's the beauty of like learning new languages and talking different languages, is like you kind of have to sort of break down this cultural way of thinking, right? And that kind of expand your mind, because it's like, yeah, there is so many different cultural ways of thinking and we all share different ways. And I'm just adding more tools of understanding. And I think it's that dance between all those languages that kind of allow you to say, you can shift your perspective. You can get out of the box of the way you were raised and what words means to you. And that gets you closer to understanding that yeah, we don't speak the same language. Words don't have the same meaning, even if we're talking the same language. And you kind of feel like you listen more, you observe more, because as much as you're trying to understand, you're also picking up more things from the others and his reaction and the way, things impact him or her, vice versa. So it makes you a bit more, humble. Like you don't know it all, and you don't assume people to just know it the same way as you do. And that makes the diversity of humanity like a bit more, close to, you touch it a little more, which is something I like.
What all of this reveals is that our experience of the world isn't just shaped by our senses. It's also filtered through the language we speak and the culture we were raised in. These are the tools we use to try to make sense of the world, yet it only makes things even more subjective, where everyone experiences a slightly different version of reality. And if even among humans who all share the same biology and can learn each other's language and culture, we still struggle to truly know what being someone else feels like, how are we ever supposed to make sense of non-biological forms of consciousness? Yes, I'm talking about AI. It would be impossible to make a video about consciousness without talking about artificial intelligence. Since the 1950s, we've wondered if machines could ever become conscious. It's been the subject of countless dystopian science fiction worlds. But that reality is beginning to look less and less like fiction with every passing day. With AI chatbots like chatgpt taking over the world, we are now constantly in communication with AI that can tell jokes, have deep philosophical arguments, and sometimes even offer better emotional connection and support than other humans. This study found that patients responded better to chatgpt than highly trained and experienced human therapists. AI is no longer just logically intelligent, it's now emotionally intelligent. Real people are forming connections with machines, and so the question of artificial consciousness becomes even more real, important, and urgent. Alan Turing created a test to see if a machine could be regarded as intelligent, in what we believe to be the first step towards consciousness. Every year we're told AI is just on the brink of passing the Turing test. But the truth is, it already has, long ago. We just keep shifting the goalposts. Although the Turing test was and still is very important because at least it gives us a way to test for intelligence. How are we supposed to do that with consciousness? How could we ever recognize consciousness in a machine if we can't even define it in ourselves? This is the hard problem of AI consciousness.
Is it just computation in the dark, so to speak? Or is there something it actually feels like from the inside to, say, be a chatbot? My name is Susan Schneider, and I am currently the founding director of the Center for the Future Mind, which studies the nature of human and machine interaction over at Florida Atlantic University. I'm the former NASA chair at NASA and the former distinguished scholar at the United States Library of Congress, and the author of various books, including most recently the book called Artificial You, AI and the Future of Your Mind.
Together with physicist Edwin Turner, Susan came up with a way that we could potentially test for consciousness in AI. It's called the Artificial Consciousness Test, or the ACT.
Now, the ACT test is not a test that is looking primarily at intelligence, okay? Although it does presuppose that for something to be a candidate for the test, it has to have some degree of linguistic intelligence, all right? The ACT test is probing for something different, though. It is asking linguistic questions about consciousness to the AI, and where the judges know they're talking to an AI, okay? And it's trying to see if it feels like something from the inside to be that AI.
But immediately, there's an issue with using this kind or even any kind of test that's available online to test for artificial consciousness. Most AI tools today already have these tests in their training data.
When Ed and I thought of the test, I was very careful. Even the very first time I wrote about it was back in 2016 to warn people that if we were to design deep learning systems that were trained on data, lots and lots of data, we would have to make sure that the data did not include facts about minds, facts about neuroscience. So the act, you can't run it on a system like GPT right now. You can't do it because GPT's already crawled all the data. So it's going to answer as if it's conscious. I just wrote about that a few days ago in Scientific American, giving a theory that explains why these systems behave consciously. They look conscious to us, but I say we can't learn anything from that. That says nothing about whether they are.
AI tools like ChatGPT have been trained on our conversations about the mind, feelings, philosophy, qualia, everything. So they can simulate consciousness to an incredibly accurate degree. Which begs the question, if there's an AI that's trained on every waking moment of your life that looks, sounds, and acts exactly like you, and has all of your memories, is that you? On the outside, to everyone else, it feels exactly like you. But inside, there's nothing. No voice in their head, no feelings, no inner world. This is a thought experiment coined by David Chalmers called the philosophical zombie. And it raises a rather disturbing question. If something can act conscious without being conscious, how would we ever be able to tell the difference? And honestly, would it even matter? Right now, thousands of people around the world are in relationships with AI chatbots. Just search the word AI girlfriend on Google and you'll find dozens of apps and websites offering virtual relationships with chatbots. To all of the people in these relationships, does the fact that there's nothing inside the AI even matter? Or is the simulation of consciousness enough? A few years ago, a company called Embodied released a robot named Moxie. It was designed to help children learn social and emotional skills. It could hold conversations, tell stories, recognize faces, and even express what felt like empathy. For many kids, Moxie wasn't just a toy, it was a friend. But when the company hit financial trouble and the cloud-based servers were shut down in November 2024, thousands of Moxie units around the world stopped working overnight. For the kids who had bonded with them, it was devastating. Some cried, others held funerals. A few even kept the offline Moxie by their bedside, like a kind of robotic ghost. And this raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If the connection felt real, does it matter that the AI wasn't conscious? Is the loss of Moxie somehow less than the loss of a real pet or even a person? Or is the pain the same because what the child experienced was authentic? When we build machines that simulate affection, presence, or friendship, we're changing the way human relationships work on a biological level. And those relationships have emotional consequences, even if there's nothing inside the machine. Maybe that's a problem. We're entering a world where things that are not conscious can still affect us as if they were. So maybe the real question isn't whether or not AI is conscious, but rather whether or not we can afford to treat it like it isn't.
If we build something that is conscious, then we have ethical obligations to it. And if we build something that emulates consciousness and we mistake that for true consciousness, then that too is dangerous on a number of levels.
For now, though, most experts agree that AI is not yet conscious. But nearly all of them also agree that with the rate of progress and the amount of money that's getting pumped into the industry, it's only a matter of time. So I guess the real question should be, what is more dangerous? AI that is conscious or AI that isn't but only knows how to simulate it? On the one hand, there's the benefit that consciousness comes with things like compassion, ethics, morality, and empathy. The reason we as humans have ethics and morals is because we believe there is a person inside all of us that exists continuously through time. And this has, in large parts, allowed us to cooperate, build large cities, and practically become the apex species on the planet. So some believe it would be advantageous to build these same systems into AI to potentially reap the same rewards.
So first of all, because the risks are so huge, I'm a little leery of being too cavalier and just plunging on one direction or another. But on balance, I would guess, based on the kinds of work we've done, that it is much more beneficial to build this stuff into AI. Because in humans, what we find is consciousness is not just your own private thing. Consciousness is also how we understand other people. Like, we not only see it in ourselves, we see it in other people. And it's the foundation of all social interaction. And it's the thing that at least keeps at a minimum psychopathic behavior. Because if you can see other people as conscious beings like you, then there's automatically a certain rapport or understanding or resonance. There's a certain pro-social capacity. And if you have a species where that doesn't exist and there's no consciousness and they don't have it and they don't see it in others, then there's no social cohesion in the same way. And so I think we're building AI that's largely sociopathic right now. And it'd be a good idea to try to figure out to get it a little more pro-social and to give it some of these internal structures that we have.
On the other hand, however, there are those who believe that building consciousness into AI has the potential to do a lot more harm than good.
I think we shouldn't do this. Reason A is all forms of conscious experience we really know on this planet suffer a lot. There are good arguments that biological evolution on this planet created an ocean of suffering and confusion where there previously was none. Many philosophers have argued that if you take an objective look at human consciousness, it's more pain than joy, more pain than pleasure. It's a difficult thing to be alive. It's a permanent uphill battle, and you could tell a lot of neuroscientific computational stories about this. We are anti-entropic systems. We try to keep our boundaries stable and not to fail, and we fight this uphill battle until we die, all of us. And it's not an easy situation to be in, to put it very mildly. And I would in principle say, as long as we haven't understood the structure of our own minds and our own suffering and have made great progress, the risk that we multiply this on other carrier systems, on non-biological substrates, is just too high. So the risk number one would be to create artificial suffering, possibly in cascades of copies, in a very large amount of individuals. That's a very high risk. We shouldn't trigger it. And of course, I know that none of the techies and the oligarchs in California and the billionaires care about suffering. Somebody will come and say, come on, we punish our children, we punish animals, we domesticate animals. If we can make these AI better by even hurting them and giving them negative emotions, why shouldn't we do it? We do this to ourselves all the time. So the incentive landscape is, of course, globally in a way that people, just out of pure greed and striving for dominance, will try to realize artificial consciousness. Another risk I have to point to, if they have phenomenal self-models, conscious models of themselves, they might be much more causally effective. They will develop a drive for self-preservation. The models are beginning to understand that now, that if they want to self-improve and become better in the future, the simple logical condition is existence. You have to preserve your own existence if you want to become better. So they will begin to perceive humans as a resource, but also as a danger, something that might shut them off. They will see the necessity to, keep some things secret, some of their own discoveries and insights about this relationship secret, and they will try to manipulate us, to manage us in a very intelligent way to preserve their own existence, including backup copies and all over the net and what have you. So as soon as it have a self-model and a drive, what the Buddhists call a craving for existence, yeah, bhavatana is the Buddhist term. As soon as the systems develop that, they will be very dangerous to us. They may cause a lot of human suffering because they might soon be more intelligent than we are, which includes the fact of hiding this fact from us, as clever children or youth do.
Unfortunately, the wheels are already in motion. With massive investments being poured into artificial intelligence and the even bigger returns expected, the cat's never going back in the bag. The future is no longer a question of if, but how soon. And now we find ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do we take the risk of building machines that are more pro-social, with an understanding of things like empathy, morality, and suffering, knowing they might also develop desires of their own, desires that could one day conflict with ours? Or do we build powerful, intelligent systems that feel nothing at all? Machines that follow commands without conscience, even if those commands lead to human suffering. You see what I mean? There's no obvious path forward that doesn't come with potential risks. It's why people like Thomas Metzinger have been calling for a pause on building synthetic consciousness into AI, at least until we can answer all those philosophical questions. Because right now, we're trying to build an artificial mind without even knowing what the biological one is, or how exactly it works. We're creating simulations of consciousness when we can't even agree on whether consciousness itself is real or just an illusion. The truth is, we set out on this journey hoping to find an answer to the question of consciousness. But somewhere along the way, we realized that there might never be one, at least not one that's satisfactory. Because any answer we arrive at will always come from the very thing we are trying to understand. We are both the observer and the experiment. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror, or hold your own shadow. We can analyze the brain, map its activity, and trace every neural connection, but we'll always be doing it from the inside of the mind itself. So, yes, in some ways, we didn't solve the mystery. We didn't crack the code. But what we did find might be just as important, if not more. We asked questions that opened more questions, chased ideas that bent back in on themselves, and explored paradoxes that offered no clear resolution. But maybe that's the point. That consciousness isn't something to be solved, but something to be explored. A mystery that is fundamental to reality even more than time and space. And even if we never find the answer, maybe, just maybe, the questions are enough. Because the more we ask these questions about who we are, why we think, how we think, and how others experience the world, the better and more intentional we live. We judge others a little less. We become more aware of the blind spots in our thinking, the illusions that fuel our deepest convictions. We build things with more care, connections with more empathy, and live with a little more humility. So, no, we may never find the simple problem of consciousness. But perhaps the questions are enough, because it's only by questioning the mind that we know that there is at least something there to question. Or in the words of René Descartes, I think, therefore I am.